friends, welcome back. This is Ashley with Uncommon Roots Homestead, and today I am starting some flowers for the spring 2021 garden. All right, so it is early on a Saturday morning and we are soon gonna be doing a bunch of things, eating breakfast, and the baby will be up. But before then, I really need to get these flowers started. So I have not started any of my vegetables yet, any of my like warm vegetables like tomatoes, peppers, things like that. I am in East Tennessee, Zone 7A, and our last frost is the end of April. Now, last year we had a Mother's Day frost that was, a nightmare in the garden. So I am trying to be patient this year. They're figuring something out in the other room, but trying to be patient this year because every year what I do is get so excited, and here in East Tennessee the weather gets really warm. In fact, tomorrow it's supposed to be like 58 degrees. It's gonna feel like spring, and I'm gonna want to start everything, and then everything's gonna be ready to either be potted up or put in the garden, and I just don't usually have a ton of time for that. If you have a lot of time and then whatever, start any seed you want because you can just pot them up until they're ready to go outside. But I don't have a lot of time to do that on top of everything else on my schedule. So I try to be as close as possible to like planting them in these cells and having them be ready to go into the ground once they need to get out of these cells. So that is my goal. Kevin's about to start coffee, so I'll bring it back. All right, now that the coffee grinder is done, which I'm not mad about because I could use some coffee. So I want to, with all of that being said, now is the perfect time to start spraying flowers. So what I've already started for the spring garden, I already have started my brassicas that I'm going to plant. I'm not doing a ton of brassicas in the spring. I'll do more in the fall. And one thing I've done by mistake in the past is you need to start thinking about fall vegetables in like August, which feels like the heat of summer, but that's when you need to start those. So just a future note to self. But I've already started the brassicas that I'm going to grow. I've already started my kale. I started celery. I started artichoke. Things that take a lot of time before they're ready to go into the garden. I started those. And then in the garden, I already have onions and garlic that I planted in the fall. Those onions will be early. They'll be ready probably sometime in late May, early June. And then I can actually plant another group of onions. And the garlic will be ready in like June or July as well. So that's everything that I've started so far. So I still have the bulk of my summer vegetables that I need to start. I'm actually gonna be starting those all late next week. So around February 25th, 26th, that's when I'm gonna start all of my tomatoes, my peppers. I direct sow all of my melons and my cucumbers. They just don't transplant very well in my opinion. And we have a long growing season where we are, so it's not like, it's not a huge deal for me to start them and then go through the hassle of trying to keep them alive and get them out into the garden and have them transplant well. So I'll be starting tomatoes, peppers. I will actually start some lettuce and things like that. What else will I start? That might be about it. And most of the other things that I'm gonna do, any root vegetables, things like that, I'm gonna start directly into the garden. But I'll come back and we'll do another video when I'm doing that, and so I can show you exactly what I'm planting and how I'm starting those. But today, I am starting some flowers. So some flowers I direct slow. So sunflowers, I do that with. Zinnias, I direct sow. Last year, I actually tried to start my zinnias inside and then transplant them. And all of the ones I transplanted died, and all of the ones I direct sowed flourished. So I'm not even going to go through the hassle of starting my zinnias inside this year. They grew perfectly fine. And like I said, we have a long growing season. So our last frost is at the end of April and our first frost is at the end of October, beginning of November. So that's a lot of time. I have plenty of time to start things in the ground outside. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I've already started my lavender, like we talked about in another video. Lavender takes a really long time to germinate, and that's all looking really good. But what's crazy is I started those over a month ago and they're still just little sprouts. So my lavender's already been started. Zinnias, sunflowers will start directly in the garden. So today I wanna talk about carnations, dahlias, asters. So, and celosia. Those are what I'm going to be starting today. So a couple of these all take varying amounts of time to be ready to go out into the garden. Carnations take a long time. You want to start carnations like 10 to 12 weeks before your last frost. Now, I am within that window. Like our last frost, I think, is like 9 weeks from now or something like that. So obviously that's not quite as much time, but I'm gonna transplant these young and they should be okay. Dahlias are really cool. So you might be confused how I'm going to start dahlias from seed when you see people selling dahlia tubers, and talking about their tuber care and things like that. Well, dahlias can be started both from seed or from tuber, and if you start dahlias from seed, the plants at the end of the season will have a tuber underneath them. Usually a first year tuber is a little bit too small to actually harvest or do anything with, but if you cover them and protect them and your winter is mild enough, in the next year after they flower again, you can actually dig up those tubers and then you can plant from tubers. And planting from a tuber versus planting from a seed, you're gonna get a more established plant. So I ordered some tubers from a couple of farmers that I follow, and those plants are going to be much more abundant than these seeds. But I'm still gonna start these seeds. We live in a pretty mild climate. I should be able to protect them, overwinter them, and then I should have my own tubers that I can harvest as well. Now the tubers that I plant this year, I'll plant those after my final frost, and then in the fall I can actually harvest those tubers, and I should get 3 to 5 tubers from every one that I planted. So dahlias are really great if you want to kind of be able to multiply how many flowers that you have in any subsequent year. So asters don't take quite as long. These are 4 to 8 weeks before your final frost. Again, I'm really close to that window, so I'm gonna go ahead and start them. And then celosia is 8 to 12 weeks. So I actually put that in the wrong pile, but that's over here with the dahlias. The dahlia seeds are 8 to 12 weeks as well. So those are all the flowers that I'm planting this year. Now I will plant some flowers in with my vegetables. I do that with zinnias and tomatoes. They do really well together. But I really want a lot of cut flowers so that I can bring flowers in. I always love, Isla has these little vases that she's painted, and I love having fresh flowers on the counter. I am not going to worry about having bed space for all of these that I'm planting. What I'm actually going to do is transplant these directly into the ground outside of beds, and just kind of create, that's kind of one thing that I really love about a potager garden, is that it's a mix of vegetables and flowers and a mix of structure and kind of like free form, wild, just beauty. And so I'm really excited to kind of have that. So what I'll do is I will till up some of the ground around the beds to plant these flowers, so that you're kind of, you can walk around the beds that are a little bit more structured, that have the vegetables in them, and some will have zinnias, but then you'll also just come upon all of these other things. And we might use some stone and things like that to separate out the quote unquote flower beds. So I'm gonna go ahead and start these. What I am starting with, I have a 72 cell tray here. I buy these off Amazon. I'll link in the below, but I will say I'm not sold on these. There are a lot of companies that offer seed starting equipment. These were just cheap and easy, but I will say I have had a hard time finding the correct size tray to go under it so that I can bottom water. I'm struggling with that. So keep that in mind if you want to purchase these, that you're going to need to find a tray to go under it that's about 1 foot by 2 foot, because these are about what were they, like 10 inches by 21 inches or something like that. So yeah, but there's 72 cells. So the cells are pretty small. They're about a 1 by 1 cell. What I do is I take these, they're like heavier. They're not actually paper. They're like a plastic. And I'll take a Sharpie and I will write out what I am planting. So I've got like my red dahlia. I'll line those up at the top of the cells. So it'll be like this, if you can see. So I'll put it like here. And then that whole row, I will plant the seeds of that variety. So I'm not worried about having one of these markers for every single cell. If you were gonna do just one cell each of different flowers, you would want to mark them all. Last year I made a huge mistake, which was not marking very intuitively, and so we got to planting and I could not tell. It's like some things you can tell as they start growing what they are, but in terms of like what variety is what, I had no idea, because I had, instead of marking the cells, I had written down on a piece of paper, like 3 to the left, 4 down, this is where I started this. And then if this tray gets turned, you're all done. Like it doesn't make any sense anymore. So anyways, lesson learned. I am marking all of the rows this year. And then I'm planting, I have a lot of space. So I'm going to plant at least, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 of each thing, sometimes more. And if I do 2 rows, I will mark the next row as well, just in case, to avoid any, confusion. So I'm gonna go ahead and start these all. A lot of these are relatively small. Carnations are pretty small. So you can see what these seeds look like. They're kind of, the one thing that's different about a lot of flower seeds versus vegetable seeds is that they end up being a little bit flatter. They almost remind me of pepper seeds, actually. Whereas like if you're dealing with seeds that are this small, that are kale, they're like perfectly circular. These are not that way. So they kind of, I guess that one's gonna be a surprise. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead. I usually put 1 to 3 in each cell. That's because I won't get 100% germination. A lot of flowers like cold stratification, I'm skipping that step. So I just kind of like hedge my bets by putting a couple more seeds in each cell. And at the end of the day, after you've harvested these flowers, if you just leave one flower to go to seed in your garden, you'll be able to harvest as many seeds are in one of these packets. So I'm not really concerned about like saving the seeds and not wasting them. So I'll just put 2 to 3 in each cell. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. So I just got done planting all of those that I had out, and I have 3 rows left. So I cannot be alone in this. As I am planting these, I'm literally sitting here thinking, there's no way this is enough. This is a lot. There are 72 cells in this tray. Each of these plants, so like each of the seeds that I've planted, when one of these cells grows one plant, that's gonna grow 12 to 24 stems of flowers at any given time, and a lot of them are like cut and come again. I know that I am being ridiculous, but this is how I garden, and every year I am convinced I don't have enough. Kevin will vouch for that. We will end up at the seed store at some point in time, May, June, and I will be impulsively purchasing pre-started plants because I'm just convinced I won't have enough, which, if you're in that same boat, don't feel bad, because I'm there too. But I have 3 rows left. I was going back and forth, should I plant another row of any of what I planted? But really, I think one row, I think like 6 plants of each of these is pretty good. What I want to do is actually start some more lavender. So I started lavender already. I've had decent germination on it. I'm probably looking at like 65-70% germination. But if you remember from my garden design, I have a whole section that I want to be kind of like a pseudo lavender field, and lavender is perennial, so it'll continue to come again. I am going to, you know, hedge my bets a little bit, and I'm going to grab my lavender and I'm going to plant 3 more rows of lavender. And there are a couple of other things. I'm gonna plant poppies this year. I'm gonna direct sow those. I also have a different version of asters that I'm going to plant direct sow because they recommend it. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start, what's that, 6, 12, 18 more plants. I'm gonna go ahead and start 18 more plants of lavender because also, before I jump into that, I wanted to just give an update. So I've started a bunch of different varieties of lavender. The most common variety of lavender is Vera, and I have a lot of those. I started Vera. I actually had my lowest germination on Vera lavender, and I started it from 2 different companies. I did Livingston and also M.I. Gardner, and both of them had pretty subpar germination. I had 100% germination on the M.I. Gardner common lavender. So if you are starting lavender for the first time, I highly recommend this so far. I mean, I've never had lavender germinate 100%. Like I put like 2 to 3 seeds in each cell, like I was talking about, and I'm getting 2 to 3 little plants in each cell of what I started upstairs. And I'll go ahead and show you that in this video too, so you can kind of see what our seed starting setup looks like. But I'm gonna go ahead and do 18 more of the common lavender because I know that it's going to germinate, and it is still perennial and beautiful. And I do want a variety of lavender growing in my little lavender field, but I would rather use the space I have for something I know is gonna germinate. So I'm gonna go ahead and plant these now. Okay, now that I have planted all of these, I don't know if you could see in the first video, but I just used the end of my Sharpie and I just like burrowed just a little hole in each of the cells to put the seeds into. You want to remember when planting any type of seed, the general rule of thumb is that you want to bury it as deep as the seed is long. So if you're dealing with really tiny seeds, like, I don't know, carrots, you barely want to cover those. Like they're essentially just being like sown over the top of the soil, and they'll kind of bury themselves down a little bit. You don't want to put a super tiny seed, 3 inches down into the soil, because it's not going to be strong enough to actually reach the sunlight. And so it's just going to die in the soil. So I went ahead and did that. Each of the seeds were different sizes. I burrowed them about that deep. Now I'm just gonna go back through and cover them all up, and then I'll take you upstairs and show you our seed seed growing station. It's not really my seed starting station because I did it in the kitchen, but it's where all of our grow lights are, and Kevin moved a shelf up there, and I'm really excited to have that space this year and not be sacrificing my entire kitchen all seed starting season. But I'm gonna try to record myself as I go up the stairs. And good morning. Good morning. We're gonna go put these up with the rest of my little seedlings. So moving the seedlings upstairs, I think in an ideal world, it wouldn't be on a different, floor or so far away from outside, but we have the space that we have right now, and we have this room above the garage that doesn't have a lot of use right now. And look at that station. So Kevin built this really easily. We actually bought LED lights off Amazon let me set these down and then I'll tell you all about it. All right, so we actually had these shelves in our garage, and I bought the lights off Amazon. They are each, woo, it's bright light. The sun. Each level turns on independently, which is really great because right now, obviously, I don't have anything on the first shelf. I only have the one tray on the third shelf, and I don't have anything on the fourth shelf. So if we only need a couple, we can just turn on a couple. And it's a really great setup, and it's way more affordable to buy LED lights than it is to buy like specific grow lights. So if you didn't know, you can use LED lights. You don't need specific grow lights. But the setup is going to work really well. You might be wondering, why am I not keeping these in the greenhouse? It's still really cold outside. We've had that cold snap. A lot of the things that I'm starting right now are tender, they're frost tender. And so I don't feel comfortable starting them outside, you know, the flowers and things like that. Now the brassicas, they probably could be started in the greenhouse. It's not below freezing in there. But I just have everything else started here, so I just kept it like that. But this is our grow station setup. I know there are more beautiful setups, and there are, you know, people who are doing it differently, and that's okay. To each their own. This works for us, and let's see if Liam's awake. Hi, bud. Good morning. Hi. Good morning. Well, friends, I'm going to get this little guy up out of bed. Thank you for joining me this morning to start some flowers, and good luck gardening.